All right, ladies and gentlemen, this is the Coronavirus Task Force briefing from yesterday, 4/13/2020. The president gets up for a couple of minutes, gives some initial remarks. Dr. Fauci comes up to clarify what he had said on an interview from on Sunday, and then probably around 15 minutes or so, we straight up get into a video that the White House airs, which in my opinion, or maybe even direct fact, I mean, it is straight up propaganda, but just because it's propaganda doesn't necessarily mean it's not true. So let's get right into it, Mr. President. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, everyone.
You're welcome.
Before I begin, I'd like to offer my condolences and best wishes to the people all across our great South who have endured deadly tornadoes and other severe weather in Texas,
F5.
Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Florida, Georgia, Tennessee, and South Carolina. My administration will do everything possible to help those communities get back on their feet. We're speaking with their governors and representatives. FEMA's already on its way, and they got there as soon as we heard the word. I said, get out there. So FEMA's there, and you know the great job that FEMA does. It's really something very special. So we just want to say warmest condolences, and we're with you all the way. It's a tough deal. That was a bad level 5. That was a bad group. That's as high as it gets. It was a bad grouping of tornadoes, something that's something incredible. The power, the horrible, destructive power. America is continuing to make critical progress in our war against the virus. Over the weekend, the number of daily new infections remained flat. Nationwide,
hopefully we're getting at the top of that curve right now.
Hospitalizations are slowing in hotspots like New York, New Jersey, Michigan, and Louisiana.
Get back to some semblance
This
of
is clear evidence that our aggressive strategy to combat the virus is working, and that Americans are following the guidelines. It's been incredible what they've done. You looked at the charts, and the charts are, and the models from early on predictions where 100 and 120,000 people looked like if they did well, they were going to unfortunately perish. And we're going to be hopefully way, way below that number. So that will be a sign of people doing things right, but it's still just a horrible thing all over the world. 184 countries. This is all a tribute to our wonderful healthcare advisors and experts who have been with us right from the beginning. We appreciate it so much. In fact, Dr. Fauci's here. Maybe I could ask Tony to say a few words before we go any further. Thank you very much. Tony, please.
He's clarifying
Thank you,
his
Mr. President. Just a couple of things, and then I just want to make a comment about something that happened yesterday.
Exactly.
You're going to hear from Dr.
Question.
Burke soon about the numbers that we've been talking about, how things are starting to balance off. And I think the more as we go by each day, I think we're going to see, and again, I never like to get ahead of myself or of Dr. Burke's, but it looks like even though we've had a really bad week last week, remember when I was speaking to you before, I was saying this was really a bad week. There's still going to be a lot of deaths, but we're starting to see in some areas now that kind of flattening, particularly in a place that was a hot spot like New York. That's the first thing. The second thing is that I had a really very, very productive conversation with the Congressional Black Caucus this morning for about an hour, and they really wanted to know what exactly are we going to be doing in the immediate as well as the long range about the health disparities and the discrepancies both in infection and in poor outcome in the minorities in general, but specifically African American. And I mean, I made it very clear to them that what we have to do is focus on getting the resources where the vulnerable are, to be able to get testing done, to be able to get the appropriate identification where proper and where appropriate to isolate and contact trace if we can, but also to help mitigate in a community that is suffering and suffering much more disproportionately. So I just wanted to get that out of the way. The other point I wanted to make is that I had an interview yesterday that I was asked a hypothetical question And hypothetical questions sometimes can get you into some difficulty because it's what would have or could have. The nature of the hypothetical question was if, in fact, we had mitigated earlier, could lives have been saved? And the answer to my question was, as I always do, and I'm doing right now, perfectly honestly, say, yes. I mean, obviously, if mitigation helps, I've been up here many times telling you that mitigation works.
Right.
So if mitigation works, and you instigate it,
why
and you
weren't we
initiate it
mitigating earlier?
you will probably have saved more
I
lives.
mean, what was happening
If
all
you
January?
Initiated it later.
It's not like
you probably
we're
would have
focusing on
lost more
something
lives.
else.
You initiated at a certain time. That was taken as a way that maybe somehow something was at fault here. So let me tell you from my experience, and I can only speak from my own experience, is that we had been talking before any
always speak
meetings
from our
that we
own
had
experience.
about the pros and the cons, the effectiveness or not of strong mitigations. So discussions were going on mostly among the medical people about what that would mean. The first and only time that Dr. Birx and I went in and formally made a recommendation to the president to actually have a, quote, shutdown in the sense of not really shutdown, but to really have strong mitigation. We discussed it. Obviously, there would be concern by some that, in fact, that might have some negative consequences. Nonetheless, the president listened to the recommendation and went to the mitigation. The next second time that I went with Dr. Birx into the president and said, 15 days are not enough. We need to go 30 days. Obviously, there were people who had a problem with that because of the potential secondary effects.
Yeah.
Nonetheless,
economy.
at that time, the president went with the health recommendations, and we extended it another 30 days. So I can only tell you what I know and what my recommendations were. But clearly, as happens all the time, there were interpretations of that response to a hypothetical
What?
question.
No,
that I
nobody
just
would ever
thought it
misinterpret
be very
anything.
nice for me to clarify because I didn't
On the
have a chance to
internet.
clarify. Thank you.
Or ever.
Excuse me, the date.
You know, to be honest with you, I don't even remember what the date was. But I can just tell you the first and only time that I went in and said we should do mitigation strongly, the response was yes, we'll do it.
And what did he do? Is that the travel restrictions?
No, the travel restriction is separate. That was whether or not we wanted to go into a mitigation stage of 15 days of mitigation. The travel was another recommendation when we went in and said we probably should be doing that, and the answer was yes. And then another time was we should do it with Europe, and the answer was yes. And the next time we should do it with the UK, and the answer was yes.
In this interview, you said there was pushback.
Yeah.
Where did that pushback come
No,
from?
it wasn't, and that was the wrong choice of words. You know what it was? When people discuss, not necessarily in front of the president, when people discuss, they say, well, you know, this is going to have maybe a harmful effect on this or on that. So it was a poor choice of
Discussing
words. There wasn't
cause and
anybody saying,
effect?
no, you shouldn't do that.
Are you doing this voluntarily, or did
No,
the president
I'm doing it.
arrest you?
Everything I do is voluntarily. Please, don't even imply that.
That's what some people are thinking. That seems to be what a lot of people are thinking.
That was earlier. Travel ban was done earlier. And if you look at statistics, I happen to write a couple of them down. If you look at statistics, so on January 6th, that's long before the dates you're talking about, there were, CDC issued a travel notice for Wuhan, China, a notice, before there was even a confirmed case of the virus in the United States. That's on
I was aware of this in
6th.
January.
It's all documented because we have so
Why
much
is it
fake
that
news.
there
I
are
like to
internet
document
trolls
things.
that seem
January
to
6th,
be highlighting this
long
before a lot
the
of the
dates we're talking
media?
about, CDC issued
Leads
travel
to other
notice
questions.
for Wuhan. On January 11th, we have 0 cases in the United States. 0. We don't have any cases. So there are no cases reported that we know of. This is January 11th. The CDC issued a level 1 travel notice for health, while there were still no confirmed cases. So we had 0 cases. People want me to act. I'm supposed to close down the economy, the greatest economy in the history of the world, and we don't have 1 case confirmed in the
3%
United States.
unemployment.
That's January 11th. On January
High GDP.
17th, the CDC began implementing public health entry screenings at 3 major U.S. airports that received the greatest volume of passengers from Wuhan at my instructions. There was not a single case of the coronavirus in the United States. So on January 17th, there wasn't a case, and the fake news is saying, oh, he didn't act fast enough. Well, you remember what happened. Because when I did
do you
act,
have
I
to
was
say fake
criticized
news?
by Nancy Pelosi, by Sleepy Joe Biden. I was criticized by everybody. In fact, I was called
Then
xenophobic.
Speaker Pelosi
I was
tell people to
Biden to
go and
please
hug
define that
people
for
and
me.
get close
I was
together? And
called other things.
Bill de
by
Blasio say,
Democrats.
go out and party in
And
New York
some
City?
others, not too many others, actually.
I mean, the buck stops with the
So that-
president.
by the
The president
media,
might not think
definitely.
so, but it does.
Now, on January 21st, this is long before the time we're talking, because when Tony's talking, I believe he's talking about the end of February. On January 21st, okay, still early, there was one case of the virus. At that time, we called it the Wuhan virus, right? Wuhan. There was one case in the whole United States. We had one case. This is
One
all
confirmed.
documented. It all comes from you. A lot of it
Just
comes
like
from you.
we
people.
likely have
On
millions
January
that have probably
21st,
been
the
infected that don't
CDC
know.
activated an emergency operations center. There was just one case, one person. That's why that ad was such a phony. There was one person in the United States. You know, they use the ad, there's only one person. That statement was made at that time. One case in the whole United States, one case.
that we know of.
I'm supposed to shut down the government, the biggest economy in the history of the world.
shutting
Shut
down
it
the
down. We
government,
have
shutting down
one
the country.
case. 7 cases were on January 31st. Now, on January 21st, there was a case. Not one person had died. You heard that, Steve, right? Not one person. So we have this massive country, the United States of America. We have the greatest economy in the world, bigger
The
than
United States
China's
is
by
like
a lot.
the
right?
size of
Because
Europe.
what we've done over the last 3.5 years, prior to the virus, but including the virus. So we have the biggest economy, the greatest economy we've ever had, the highest employment numbers, the best employment numbers, best unemployment numbers also, the best of everything. So on January 31st, think of it, not one person has died. Not one. Nobody died. Not one, John. I don't think you'll find any. This is reported by CDC, confirmed by the news, which doesn't mean anything to me because they don't tell the truth. But
Wow.
CDC reported January 31st, not one person has died.
Wow.
And
Why
I
do you
issued a
keep watching
travel
it?
restriction from China. Think of it. So nobody died, and I issued. You can't get earlier than that. So we have nobody died, and I said, China, you can't come in. I'm sorry. Because I saw what was going on. Wasn't so much what I was told. It was that I saw what was going on.
On the
And I
news.
didn't like it. But I didn't speak to Tony about. Didn't speak to.
But
very
the
many
news is
people
fake
about it. I
according
didn't
to the
like it.
president.
So what did I do?
So you're
Ready?
watching the news that you say
January
is fake.
31st, in the United States, not one person had died because of the Wuhan virus. So I issued travel restrictions on that date, even though nobody died, and I got brutalized over it by the press because I was way too early. I shouldn't have done it. Brutalized by the press. But, sort of I've been brutalized for the last 4 years. I used to do well before I decided to run for politics. But I guess I'm doing okay because, to the best of my knowledge, I'm the President of the United States, despite the things that are said. So then, first mandatory quarantine in more than 50 years, we did. First mandatory in 50 years. The same restrictions that the Democrats and the media called xenophobic. Now, Joe Biden
I think Joe Biden
said
said that
he's
because
a
you called
racist.
it.
Called me
No,
a racist because
I
I
think he
said
said-
we're shutting down entry from China.
No,
We're
no.
shutting it down.
I believe you said
He called me
the China virus.
xenophobic,
He
and he
said
called me racist and other
xenophobic
things.
from that
Since then,
on the
on a
Twitter.
Friday night 2 weeks ago, Joe
Because we all know
Biden
Twitter is
issued
real
a
life.
It wasn't him. He didn't write it. I'm sure he doesn't even know that it was issued. But the people from his campaign, who are smart, people that write these little PR releases are pretty smart, reasonably good. Not the best, but they're not bad. But they issued a statement saying that Joe Biden agrees that that President Trump was right to close it down to China. Now, he did that. Now, he issued it on a Friday night. We've all heard about that, John, Friday nights, right? In fact, his was later Friday night than I ever released mine on Friday nights, okay? So he did it pretty late. I mean, like at 11 o'clock in the evening or something. It's pretty late. Anyway, so Joe Biden issued And it's one of those things.
Nobody
But
would ever embellish
in February,
anything.
Nancy Pelosi said we should come to
Ever.
Chinatown. This is late February. Come to Chinatown. We think it's very safe. Come here. Let's all have the big parade, Chinatown parade,
Wow.
probably referring to San Francisco. And that's it. But I took this action early. And so the story in the New York Times was a total fake. It's a fake newspaper, and they write fake
I
stories.
think a lot of folks,
And
if we
someday,
had the
hopefully in
coverage,
5 years when I'm not here,
that at least what
those
I was
papers
seeing
are
out
all
of
going
China
out of business
along
because nobody's gonna
January
wanna read
and
them.
February,
But now they like them
I think
because
people
they
may
read about
responded
me.
different.
Now with that, I have a couple of interesting. We have a few
Why didn't the president know?
clips that we're just going to put up. We could turn the lights a little bit
Why
lower. I
didn't
think
our
you'll find them
elected
interesting.
officials know?
And then we'll answer some questions. I'll ask you some questions because you're so
This-
guilty, but forget it. But most importantly, we're going to get back onto the reason we're here, which is the
Oh,
success
here
we're
comes the
having, okay?
propaganda.
Please,
Quote
you can put it on.
unquote.
People should be more concerned right now with the flu in this country.
A lot of people are concerned about the coronavirus because they're hearing a lot of news about it right now.
And
But the
see?
reality is, comparing it to the flu, for example, it's not even close to being at that stage.
What if it is worse? Is this a moment where
Fuck.
maybe countries put politics aside, a little bit of
Like
pride
Dr.
aside,
Fauci.
and do we have U.S. officials,
before the
should
travel ban
U.S.
from China.
professionals such as yourself get involved?
How worried should Americans be about coronavirus?
Fuck.
Coronavirus is not going to cause a major issue in the United States.
Oh, well, that was wrong. It's on the 28th.
Well, we've asked
You're
them to
not
accelerate
showing us
whatever
the
they're
date.
doing in terms of a vaccine.
We will be suspending all travel from Europe to the United States for the next 30 days. To unleash the full power of the federal government in this effort today, I am officially declaring a national emergency. Medicare patients can now visit any doctor by phone or video conference at no additional cost.
With that
The first
uplifting
1
music.
million masks will be available immediately.
As there were more cases, and it was clear that it was spreading out of China, where it originated, the president took this move that he was widely criticized for by Democrats and even some Republicans at the time, which was he halted a number of flights from China into the U.S. The idea was to halt the spread of the disease, keep transmissions to a minimum. He was accused of xenophobia. He was accused of making a racist move. At the end of the day, it was probably effective because it did actually take a pretty aggressive measure against the spread of the virus.
His team is on it. They've been responsive late at night, early in the morning, and they've thus far been doing everything that
Apparently
they can
during
do.
this,
And I
CNN
want
kept
to say
cutting
thank
away,
you,
changing
and I want to
the
say
little
that I
bottom thing,
appreciate
saying the president's
Returns
rewriting
calls,
history and everything.
Reaches out. He's been proactive.
Governor of
We got
California,
that
Democrat
Mercy
Gavin
ship
Newsom.
down here in Los Angeles. That was directly because he sent it down here. 2,000 medical units came to the state of California. These FMS, these field medical stations, and that's been very, very helpful.
The president has been outstanding through all this. The vice president's been outstanding. Members of the coronavirus task force, very responsive.
We had asked if we could have, New Jersey could have access to a piece of the beds that are on the USNS Comfort, and the president came back, called me a short few minutes before I walked in here to say indeed they would grant that to New Jersey. So that's a big step for us in addition to all the other capacity. That news is literally hot off the press, and I thank the president and vice president who are on the call together.
President Trump approved Arizona's request for a presidential major disaster declaration. I want to thank the president for a quick turnaround. We requested this on a Wednesday, and we had approval by Saturday morning. And we are grateful to the administration for
Governor
their
Baker got
continued
the
support and
Major disaster
responsiveness.
declaration approved within, I
I
believe, 24 hours.
The president and the vice president for doing a really good job of communicating with all the governors.
I believe VP Pence kind of went over there for a while.
Hundreds of
So
clips like that from
now, here's the thing. The president goes on, I believe he has a back and forth with Jim Acosta, where basically Mr. Acosta asks Basically, the White House put that together because it could definitely could be a violation of the Hatch Act, which is basically, that seems like a campaign style video. Seems like a campaign style video that was likely put together utilizing resources from the executive branch. Is that a violation of the Hatch Act? I have no idea. I haven't read the Hatch Act. I'm not an attorney. But at the same time, I'm like, okay, let's suppose it is. Are you going to try to impeach the president again for that? Because somehow I think we kind of got here because we were talking about other things, such as impeachment. Yes, as Speaker Pelosi said, he's impeached forever. Representative Tulsi Gabbard said we should just censure the president and just move on with our lives. What if we censured the president and we moved on with our lives and we were paying attention to this during January? Would we have less deaths? I don't know. That would be Monday morning quarterbacking. But here's the thing. I personally would like to see the president act more presidential. Unfortunately, he doesn't seem to have any incentive to do that because, well, he's the president. He won. And he loves a fight. I almost think, again, this is my opinion, that he kind of almost did this. Somebody probably told him, Mr. President, they might kind of go after you for this, and he doesn't care. He wants to bring it so then he can just continue to fight with the media and try to obliterate them. Because let's face it, it's like if you look at a lot of polling, it's like, how's the president doing? You might not like the president, you might not even approve of his overall job, but as far as handling this, I'm seeing numbers 50, 60% or so, saying it's like he's out there, he's in the public eye. I mean, a lot of folks seem to think that Governor Cuomo is doing a better job because, well, he's also talking more like a traditional politician. And, well, he's also a New Yorker. So it's kind of that thing that resonates with a lot of people. Might not always like folks from New York, especially if we're playing each other in baseball or football or anything. But here's the thing. We're all Americans. So I'm going to leave it there. But, hey, thank you all for watching. Peace out. Stay safe. And long live the elbow bump.